We're going to call the meeting to order, and all members are present except Manager McNamara. And the first item is the setting of the meeting agenda, and there are a couple of additions. Under new business, D, the Washington County resolution for the pilot project funding. Did I get that correct? Yeah?
Right, it's a memorandum of agreement for the watershed-based funding pilot.
Okay.
Correct.
So we will be taking action on that. And then under old business, we're adding item E. There will be an update on our 2019 budget schedule. Mike has some updates for us, and we can begin talking about that. And was there anything else? We don't have manager updates listed here, so after the summary and approval of board direction, let's add 6A. I know there's one topic I'd like to update the board on, and there might be others from other members too. So do we have all of that? Mike, did I get everything? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda with the changes and additions.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public open forum. Would you like to address the board on any topic?
Good to see you all.
Nice to see you too. All right, so we will close the public open forum. Next item is new business. A, Resolution 180601, standard permitting documents.
Hi, President and Managers. So going through the rules update, we had a variety of discussions on various elements, and furthermore, talking with our district engineer and looking at other district processes, et cetera, we felt that in addition to just simply taking the time to look at a few more things that we have internally, we felt that it was appropriate for us to make some updates, partly from some feedback, but also mostly just from our own inspection of the forms and templates that we were currently had been using. So at this time, then the staff had, with legal counsel, has prepared a number of items, and they are set forth in the resolution 18-06-01, with them accompanying then that packet. So if there's anything in particular that the board has of question, staff is available here also, Aaron Edison, to help answer those questions. Otherwise, we would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
Okay, I only have two items. One is on stabilization of excavated ground. I did not see any stipulation on how much time is required to stabilize that open ground, and particularly those that drain into ditch systems and culverts. So that's number one. And number two was the method of distribution to the permittee. Is this going to be part of a packet, or is it? Are they getting a memo that says this is all online? How is that part going to be handled?
First question, and staff can provide some additional clarification, but the stabilization, we have 14 days for stockpiles, et cetera, that the permittees are required to stabilize the site. Of course, we encourage them to do it immediately after if they anticipate that it's going to be there for some time, or if we are looking at the weather forecast, which we do on an ongoing basis. As such, with regard to distribution, some items and maybe Aaron can communicate a little bit about which ones go in particular orders, but of course, I mean, these would all be on our website, available on our website, and then as appropriate through the sequencing. Obviously, initially they would receive a permit application form just independently. That's the first thing. And then through that process, depending on what they're applying for, staff would provide the additional information either through the link or hard copies if they come to the office or such, but typically we do it electronically.
Okay, and will there be a checklist, though, of, or a list of items that, I know this has to be customized depending upon the project, but will they at least get a list of the documents that they're required to submit in each case? Is that correct?
We have a document that's not here for review, but it's just a guidance document that has a checklist of exhibits that people need to turn in for each rule that they trigger.
Right, perfect. That's, I think, very important to maintain the record. So if there are any issues that come up in the future, we have that written record that shows that everything was discussed and dispensed to them. Or they were directed to the website, so they had the choice. So that's good. And then on the stabilization, is that in our rule that it's specific to just stockpiles, or is it any disturbance that's occurred on the site that has to be stabilized in 14 days?
So, let's see, so standards for erosion sediment control plan. The erosion control plan will specify measures for indefinite stabilization of exposed soil and stockpiled earth and erodible materials in the event that site work is suspended. These materials will be implemented within, or these measures will be implemented within 7 days of a request from the district.
What document is that, Mike?
This is page 29 of our current rule.
Okay, of the rules?
Correct,
Okay.
so there's that piece of it. But by and large, under site maintenance practices, there are a number of pieces. All sediment control measures shall be installed and district shall be given 3 business days notice in writing before any land disturbing activity, so there's that. Sediment control measures shall not be removed until project is complete. Sediment control measures shall be removed within 14 days thereafter, so they're required to keep it in place until we've deemed it stabilized. The other reference to time is, again, also with the permittees on the all soil stabilizations until land. So they have to inspect, maintain, and repair all disturbed surfaces and all erosion sediment control facilities and practices and all soil stabilization measures until the land disturbing activity has ceased. Every day construction activity is performed after every rain event of 1/2 inch or more total precipitation, and at least weekly when construction is not performed. So this is what the staff currently does with respect to our inspection frequency. So then the item particular for stabilization is on this, all disturbed areas, exposed soils and soil stockpiles must be stabilized. And it does in fact then state that they must be initiated immediately to limit soil erosion on any portion of the site when construction activity has permanently ceased or will not resume for a period exceeding 14 calendar days. So stabilization must be completed no later than 14 calendar days after the construction activity has ceased. So,
And that's in our rules.
correct. And then there is an additional piece that if it's within 200 linear feet of a wetland or water body or a storm water inlet, then that is that the stabilization must be completed no later than 24 hours. So all those pieces are within our rules
Okay.
under
Well,
section 3.
I think that because that's the one that is the main cause of degradation, if we can somehow put that onto a memo form and highlight those triggers, I think it would make it easier for applicants to comply, and I would like to see the staff consider that as an addition to this packet that you've already put together. It's one thing to read through all of those rules, like you just did, and know where they are. It's quite another to have a memo that's very specific, and it becomes more of a bullet point checklist, basically.
Staff has previously prepared a kind of a cheat sheet for applicants, and we could add this to the erosion sediment control component, just because it's, as you said, it's the most important element of the permitting process.
Right.
So,
those are my comments. Otherwise, I think this is going to help and hopefully avoid situations like we had last year and improve things going forward. So I'm glad to see that this was accomplished. Any other comments from board members? Does everyone agree to the request that I made and the completion of the checklist for sediment stabilization?
No.
Okay. All right.
Erin, do you have anything else that you want to add?
We do sort of require that statement on erosion sediment control plans. So when they submit an erosion sediment control plan, that's stated on there, the 14 days. So that is on, just to clarify that is on there.
Yeah, and I think, my point is that we're dealing with a gross violation on the Woods of Comfort, and so that continues to be a problem. So anything we can do to make it easier for construction people and permit application individuals so that they understand what those points are and the triggers are. And we don't have to dig through the rules all the time to find them. They're right there on the check sheet. And staff has done a good job of going in and monitoring that situation, but it has been an ongoing problem.
Right, and I guess, to a certain degree, this, little short, and this is just a separate one that staff has more recently completed for the creating of a basic erosion sediment control plan, because we find this particularly a lot of individual homeowners that are, or certain contractors maybe, are not familiar with what is entailed, so they've put this together. And at some point, it's a matter of, yes, doing a certain amount of hand-holding, but we never know how knowledgeable anybody is at any one time until we start seeing them in action. And of course, the more experienced builders, we have no issues with ever. They're right on top of it, and I mean, we see that in Chestnut Creek, for example. The various builders out there, some, yep, all looks good and no problems, and they're doing multiple homes, and you can go over to another spot where they're doing maybe one or two, and there's multiple violations, and that's just kind of, the way it is, and then but we're just fortunate that the cities, all three, Scandia, City of Forest Lake, and Wyoming, have been really supportive of the district's efforts in this area and have been willing to issue, or at least make threats of issues of stop work orders. And that gets people's attention pretty quickly.
Yep.
And then we typically see results. The Woods and Comfort is a great abnormality from that standpoint, just from the standpoint that it sat with that ticket on there for about 3 weeks or more. No construction on that
But
house.
before that, it was several months, but it was there, because construction began last fall. So, and that happens to be very close to a water body. So it's no reflection on what staff has done or not done. It is simply a way for us to accommodate the education of everyone that has to get a permit from us, and to make sure that they understand what our requirements are for the protection of the water bodies. And the easier we can make that, the better compliance we're going to have. And we move on, and we continue to do what we're doing, and hopefully get more people to comply right from the beginning, because we've made the process easier for them. And this is the start. So if there's no other comments, then the next action is to move for acceptance of Resolution 180601.
I'll make that motion with staff addressing the concerns or changes that you wanted.
I'll second.
Okay, this is a roll call vote. Jackie Anderson, aye. Jackie McNamara, absent. Wayne Moe.
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz.
Aye.
John Spence.
Aye.
I declare the resolution 180601 has been adopted by a unanimous vote. Yeah. Thank you. Next item, appointment of new Citizens Advisory Committee member.
Madam President, managers, we have an individual that's residing over on Bone Lake that moved in maybe last year, I think, and has expressed a strong interest in increased participation, readily involved herself with the Lake Association, reached out to the district to let her know that she had past involvement with the watershed district. In fact, she's a former board member for the Ramsey Washington Watershed District. And so she's expressed an interest in joining the CAC, and there's an application that's in the packet, and so she again has communicated to me that she would like to be more involved, and this would be a great start for Jen.
I agree. I got to meet her at that one CAC meeting about a month ago. And she's very bright and very eager to serve.
Sounds like a great fit.
A great fit, yeah. So I will make the motion to approve Jen Ochnick to serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Next item, Bone Lake Drained Wetlands Contracting Authority.
Madam President, managers, currently we have this Clean Water Fund through Bowser for the Bone Lake partially drained wetland restoration project. And the arrangement that we have there is that we have contracted with the Washington Conservation District to do the outreach. You may recall that the Chisago SWCD completed the survey work of the wetlands for the district, in particular in that area, and there's a large number of degraded wetlands or highly altered in various forms or one way or the other. We had been looking for a project in Bone Lake. We originally thought we were going to have one along Oak Hill Road, and that fell through with from the landowner side, but it was also quite costly. Upon reviewing those wetland pieces, we identified then 6 sites that were ranked high, that were leading to, based on the diagnostic work, were leading into the drainage area for Bone Lake that worked or fit in quite well. UR then did some modeling analysis to show the improvements on those potential 6 sites. Of the 6, we have 3 that are currently moving forward. The landowners have indicated their willingness to participate. 2 of them are individual landowners, and 1 of them has 2. The other ones are far more complicated because they have multiple landowners across those remaining 3 sites. So I admit that the likelihood of getting those under contract will be a much greater challenge. But we still have our normal period of time under the contract with Bowser to try to get these projects in place. And so in conversation with them, one of the things that we're trying to work through now is actually getting these contracts for the 3 underway, the design completed, and then constructed this fall. The district, Washington Conservation District, has been out. They have a preliminary, well, actually close to final design on the 3 sites. And we've met with them once, and we just had EOR review them a second time. And I need to go back to the Conservation District and let them know that certain design components that the district engineer recommends are not optional. These are things that the district is requesting. These are not things that are things that, you know, your judgment versus the district engineer. The district engineer is responsible at the end of the day for the district-related projects. So, so I need to go back and communicate that in as polite a way as possible. But I think that the board would agree that that's in fact the direction that should be given. On the contracting side, there was a question as to how the funds should be passed through, whether they would go through the Washington Conservation District, you know, whether or not we would work with the landowner to have the contractor or have the contracts, which there's a copy in the packet, you know, if they would do it or if we did. But upon review of the documents with legal counsel, it is recommended that we, in fact, enter into the contracts with the landowners, so we'll make arrangements with the Conservation District, who has presently had the relationship with them, to go out there to get the contract signed, and then that we will engage a contractor based with some assistance from the WCD to identify contractors that are more of the scale to do these projects, and then pay the contractors directly. So all of that then is really then a matter of then again upon recommendation from Mr. Holtman is that then to ease the process, this is to authorize the district administrator to enter into the agreements upon review of legal counsel with the landowners to complete these projects.
Just a couple of questions from me. The sites that we're talking about are the ones that were identified in the Bone Lake Diagnostic Study? And no?
They were done through the wetland inventory work that Chisago SWCD completed for us.
Okay, so is this additional then to what we had laid out for the, this isn't the BMP program, this is?
Correct, it's not.
Okay, okay. So this is something additional to the Bone Lake Diagnostic Study work?
Correct.
Okay. Did we bring any background material on this, just for a refresher? Can anyone tell me where these sites are? Because we had several identified in the diagnostic study that we wanted to work on in both Moody and Bone. So are these worse than those areas, or this is going to provide us more results by attacking these?
Madam President, are you referring to, it was last board meeting or a couple of meetings ago, the sites we showed that was identified by Chisago SWCD that we were going to do some further work to help re-rank those with benefits to Moody and Bone. So that is another more, oh, Mike has a.
Well, no, right, these are different efforts. Yep. One is from a strictly cropland management side. This is the wetland portion. So, and I don't know, Jessica, if you can, I know you're looking, so we'll see if we can't pull it up. All these sites through that process that we're looking at are on the kind of southeast portion of Bone Lake, along east of Melanie Trail, one is south of Oak Hill Road. And of the 6 sites, in fact, of all of the wetland projects that were in the top 50, because remember we had a list of top 50 wetlands sites that were recommended. There were 2 that if I could have picked them, those are the ones that I would have wanted. And they're in green on this map here. So they're, because they're the last guardian, so to speak, to Bone Lake. So they will have the greatest impact. So we, or I shouldn't say we, but the,
These were sites we had identified, but also Washington County identified them as.
the Chisago SWCD did all the initial legwork of all the drained wetlands. So some were completely farmed through, some have been partially drained, you know, just they were ditched in some form or another. And so there were a large number, particularly farther into the north. But for Bone Lake, the load is more diffused than we have in Moody Lake. So we know it's from, you know, there's kind of like 20% come from the south, there's 20% coming from the north, you know, there's kind of a mix from the east, and then there's the internal load. So it's going to be a matter of identifying, you know, filtering through all that information and all these sites across the landscape, both in terms of the agricultural sites and the wetlands, to parcel out these very few that meet the criteria of what the district is after in terms of efficiency and cost per unit. So, so it's the very bottom one in red, and then that 17, that site up on top.
What's the red versus the green? Well, I mean, what are these here versus?
Just they're a priority
Okay.
piece,
And the yellow is the boundary of the Bone Lake?
drainage area, right?
Drainage area?
Yeah.
And that's Bone Lake up in the upper left?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the concentration then is 17 and 2 of these identified drained wetlands?
No, number 7
7, okay.
and 17.
Uh-huh.
And, well, 17 is going to be actually constructed into, into 2 components. It's going to be divided, because there's going to, so it's going to treat that area coming from the northeast, and then it's going to be, then there's going to be another berm constructed on the western edge of that to capture the stuff coming from the south. So,
And is this where the 3 sites are in 17 that are under design?
there will be 2 sites on 17, and then at the very bottom, number 7 is also under design.
And 7?
Yeah, those are multiple landowners. They get to be more complicated. I think there might be 4 with that one. Number 9, I think, is 3 property owners.
So in this first round, we've got 2 sites in 17 and 1 in 7 that are
Correct.
going to fall under this grant.
Correct.
Okay, and number 7 contributes how much phosphorus to bone?
I'd have to look that up. I don't recall specifically.
It seems so far away, you know, and so,
Well,
But that whole area, if you drive that, Jackie, that
Yep.
is all the way from the southeast end of Bone Lake. If you go up Oak Hill, there's a grade, that whole area is a water, I mean,
it's downhill toward bone, is that what you're saying?
It's all downhill towards Bone,
Okay.
and that one farm that we were looking at doing some work on, I was there when we were having a period of rain. And it looked like a river flowing through their barnyard
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and that's in this area here that you're talking about?
that's
Whole
farther
area- This whole
north.
area is
Okay.
all part of it, it all
Okay,
drains towards Bone.
but on this particular, for number 7, what it does, a lot of this, if you can look on the left-hand side of your screen coming into Bone Lake, there's that little side road. That entire area drains eastward towards 7, along as the northern portion that comes back, it all concentrates into that area. That's the low spot in the landscape across there for you know, 150 to 200 acres or something. And again, why it ranked out. And then if we were to go back and look at what you were referencing earlier, the diagnostic study, these were fields that were not red, but at least yellow. So they were, so it corresponds, the overlay is such that through that process, we would have probably also identified a similar project in that location to address what we saw through the diagnostic modeling work.
Well, there's no doubt that agricultural drainage in the Bone Lake District is the biggest factor. I mean, there's just no
Correct.
doubt about it. So I'm not questioning work in the ag area, it's why these, and are we certain that these are going to have the biggest impact? So that's really the point of it. And this is a grant, so there's no payback. What's our contribution?
25%.
Ours would be 20%, but we're also covering then the design work. So that was part of the application.
And the grant
process.
is how much?
80,000, but this will not, these three projects won't cover that. That being said, in review of that site up above, number 17, then there was an opportunity to raise the berm anywhere from like 8 inches to another foot. There was enough capacity. That would provide some additional treatment. And again, since it's the last piece, the landowners want, in fact, more water. So for all those reasons and the potential unlikeliness of these other areas being under contract, we might as well get more of what we can get, at least at this time. We will always continue to pursue these other locations, and maybe through time, you know, permitting, development, redevelopment, turnover, we might be able to get to those.
As our Ag BMP program gets developed, a lot of this will fall under that too. And the tier system, all of that will come into play.
Yeah, but there's like, for example, on number 8, one of the landowners there, and I was on that site visit one, we were for that particular one. Great potential. They seemed like they were, at least the one, you know, that eventually said no. They were concerned that the agricultural runoff coming onto the property would be polluted such that it would be a nuisance on their property. So, because they're far enough downstream. And, you know, so we tried to assure them, no, it's, you know, it's not going to be like a chemical spill site. I mean, it's, but at the end of the day, that they just really, they were pretty adamant that they decided that they did not want to have that kind of runoff sitting on their property, that they would just rather have it, let it run straight through and go on to the neighbors and then into Bone Lake. And, you know, it's private land, and so unless you go through a condemnation process, you're not going to get it. You know, so I don't think we're going to do that for this project. So unless, and so again, so until they have a change of heart or a change of ownership, we see that particular site as to be quite unlikely.
So, but isn't this a partially drained wetland to start with? So this was a wetland at some point in time, and through the years, it's been either legally or illegally converted to something else.
Correct.
Isn't there some leverage there that we have?
No.
Or no?
No. So if you look at the top of that number 8 site,
Yep.
you can see then a line that kind of goes off to the northeast and then comes back around
Yep.
to the northwest. Well, that's the ditch, you know, so, I mean, that's, you know, so it's somewhere along the line, you know, for.
The ditch again, can you highlight that one?
For agricultural drainage purposes, you know, they just cut through the landscape at the, you know, from one end to the other that they thought would be the most efficient way to.
Is it the gray line?
Right through the middle.
No, it's kind of the
number.
green, you can see like these green lines.
Oh, yeah.
And that are typically constitute.
Phosphorus laden lines, yes, I see.
Well, they're brush and trees and things like that.
Yep, they
you know,
like the
so.
phosphorus.
Well, nobody's mowing them or chewing them or
Sure.
anything like that, so.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's, okay.
Well, you're more or less just asking if other stuff comes along, so you can sign documents, right?
Correct, that I can enter, because the district limit is 20,000 for the administrator, and that's assuming it's within the budget. These will likely be over that in total. So,
All right, well, I'll make a motion to authorize the district administrator to enter into agreements on review of legal counsel with landowners in order to complete the Bone Lake partially drained wetland restoration project.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I would just like to see, Jessica, if you would send out that map that you just had up to the board to add to this memo or a file. That would be helpful.
And we'll give you the total phosphorus reduction in
Yeah.
the projects too.
Yeah,
Apologize for not having that in there.
yeah. And that will be added to the online minute, okay, an agenda packet, I mean. Okay, very good, thank you. Item D, Washington
We have to
County.
vote on it, don't
Oh,
we?
I'm sorry, jeez. That important part, sorry about that. All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign, motion passes unanimously, thank you. Next item is a resolution on the pilot project from Washington County. Mike, if you can,
Madam President, managers, I have been, well, some of the board members have also participated in some of the discussions on this watershed-based funding element of the One Watershed, One Plan that came through the legislature from the previous session and then to Bowser. And presently, they have a pilot program for the metro counties, and Washington County being one of them. There's a compressed timeline for completing some program structure. Everything has to be into Bowser by, basically by July 2nd. And to make it fairly easy, the 10 organizations in question, the Washington County Conservation District, and the 8 watershed organizations, had been meeting pretty much every 2 weeks to try to work through this, and ultimately went to the additional partners, all the cities and townships, et cetera, to let them know that the intent was to just split it equally for this first round. So that's the current plan for this, but we still then need to proceed with a couple elements of it. And one is is the MOA, and at the end of the day, each organization is going to get roughly $78,000 through this program.
what's the total funding amount?
$780,000,
Right.
so everybody's getting 10%.
Okay, I move to authorize the board president and administrator to sign the watershed-based funding MOA and delegate authority to the administrator to submit the proposed project list to the Washington Conservation District.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Moving on to old business, 2017 Water Monitoring Report, final report. It's before us for acceptance.
As president managers, I don't think there's really much to add. We had the report given previously here to the board, and we've talked through it a couple times. Dr. Funke is available for questions also if there's anything. Otherwise, it's an acceptance of the report.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2017 water monitoring report.
To accept.
To accept.
I'll second.
Okay,
Just one question?
Yes.
The FWMC, does that pertain to the issue that I raised about consolidating the two numbers into one unit on the charts?
The load and the flow?
Yeah.
Yep, that's what the flow.
So it's an index,
concentration does.
basically. Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Yep.
I couldn't read the numbers in the chart. It's so small.
They're kind of small.
Yeah.
That always makes you worry a little bit.
And the additional narrative will be added next year's
Right,
report.
right,
So,
which will
yeah,
help a
that-
lot, I think.
Yeah, they captured.
It'll be easier to read.
Yeah, they captured, I think, what we required of them, or asked of them, I mean.
Okay.
So, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the 2017 monitoring summary report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Next item is Third Lake Pond project update.
Madam President, managers, the gift that keeps on giving.
It's a project that won't go away.
Yeah, well, there's, I don't want to say we're coming around the corner, because that always seems to come back against me, so. But I do want to just provide an update, and then also, as appropriate, perhaps even though it's not listed as an action item, maybe this should be considered. We previously provided a memo in March as to what the activities were going to be for the final restoration. The board authorized an amount not to exceed $11,695 and $6,255 respectively for the two components. Of course, that was when there was lots of snow, and we didn't know about how things looked once spring or summer arrived. So we've been out to the site several times, including with the respective contractors, and then we held one joint meeting out there as well. That was both some EOR staff and myself. And for the prairie restoration in particular, what we identified, and by looking at the attached map, we thought that the restoration was really going to include initially just this sort of green area. We were hoping that the rest of it was gonna, going into the fall, it looked like it had a chance. But this spring, it was just dominated by weeds. It had not been managed sufficiently through the end of the year due to basically the landowners on a couple times kicked the contractor off site, so with a misunderstanding as to, their authority to actually enter and do work. So upon the district engineer's review of the site, along as well as with prairie restoration, we've really deemed it necessary to do a large-scale wholesale redo of the restoration on this city-owned property. With the exception of this red triangle, which is like maybe the sole area that's good enough to leave, and most any other location, we probably would have just said, let's just redo that too. But it'll provide some nice flowers this year. That area will produce a small subset of what the site will look like in the future. So almost from a public relations standpoint, we thought, well, let's leave that area. And the method that they're going to do the burn down, chemical burn down later in the season to then start over, they can easily work around that kind of site, and saves a small amount of money too. So maybe. We did incorporate this mow path, that's that yellow area in the northeast corner that was approved by Bowser previously. And then on the west side, where the landowners were concerned about the straightness or not so straightness of the line, myself and Mike Majeski from EOR spent an hour or two in the field calculating the exact square footage adjustments, so we would meet the Bowser requirement of having the same square footage, but squaring it off and making it a more usable space for the residents. We suspect, though, that at some point, because they're still mowing between that tree area or where the culvert is and that shed that's on the city property. And we expect that they're still gonna have concerns about the fact that that's going to be restored. And so that area around the shed, but that's still an area that we had intended initially. And we're gonna still proceed with it. And so once it gets sprayed off and killed and such, but they're not supposed to be mowing it. We don't want them to mow it. And in fact, if there's an area that probably should have a buffer, it's the area that's close to blacktop and such. So we'll just see where it goes. But we did take their input. We've made adjustments. We tried to accommodate the best as possible. And of course, I'll remind the board that Bowser said that that was really an oversight. Had they known that there was this other turf area, they would have required the whole thing have been buffer when they reviewed the plan. So they thought somehow that was not city property. So so the residents have use of some city property that they're currently mowing and maintaining. But I know Bowser would like it to be fully restored into a native vegetation, but this is where we're at. So the price for the prairie restoration piece is going to go up. We don't have the final quote since their work will be, the next step will be later in the season, but we think it'll be something doubled of where it currently is at. So I don't have a number for the not to exceed amount regarding that change. If desired, I can bring it back for a final approval, but I just wanted to make the board aware what's going on. But on the other side, Shoreline Landscaping, they're set to start work on Tuesday. And so far, people seem to be okay with the fact that things are happening out there. One resident today brought in a bag of zebra mussels and said, "Look what's out there." So we appreciate the fact that residents are taking note of things that are out there, but.
Out there in this
Yeah,
wetland
on the
area?
lake. No, not
On the lake, okay, yeah.
On the lake side, so.
And is that shoreline area still cleaner than it was before the project?
You mean from a,
Clarity standpoint?
oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Third Lake is not doing as well as it has in the past as a whole, but this area, they're not seeing nearly the sludge. I mean, well, and
Yeah.
if I can make a surmise somewhat from the fact that we've had no complaints, that's an improvement as well. But certainly the monitoring data is demonstrating that the project is improving the situation.
But do you need a motion on this, or do we have to wait for the not to exceed number?
It's really up to the board. I do not anticipate that they're going to be doing any work at this point. You've authorized a certain dollar amount. Once I get the final proposal, I can bring it back because it is outside the scope of what the project originally cost.
You think it's going to be double, though? So instead of 62.55, it's going to be something around 12,000, 13,000?
Well, certainly a portion of their cost is simply mobilization, just getting out there. So, but the square footage is, triple, but I do not expect the cost to be tripled.
So which sections of this map is prairie restoration doing versus shoreline landscape?
Everything on this map is prairie restoration, all the color area.
Oh.
That's entirely theirs. So on the top map, it was the light green. And then for the bottom map, we're just showing the distinction between the wetland mix and the
different kinds of.
and the buffer mix, right? So
When is prairie restoration starting?
at this point, there's no urgency. There's nothing they can do to save this season, so to speak. So they will do a burn down, by fall sometime, August, September.
Did you say a chemical burn down?
Correct.
So will they do like Roundup or?
Correct. Yep. So they'll probably mow it prior to that. and I might be interested. I'll check with them. I probably would hope or want them to go mow it once here before it all goes to seed in the summertime. But the board has already authorized a certain dollar amount that would fit within that piece of it, so.
So we don't really need to authorize this right now, because they're not gonna be able to do the work until next season?
No, it'll be this season, but late in the fall,
Okay,
but,
so we can wait until we have that firm number.
right, and you've already authorized a certain dollar amount, and we have a contract with them and such, but I guess I just wanna, one, make you aware of that, but then also get concurrence from the board that this is the direction, that you're okay with the direction that we're going with this to get it.
Who are you dealing with out there, Ryan, or?
Jeff West and, trying to think of who the other person is,
Okay, Ryan does probably most of their burning and stuff.
oh,
Just curious.
So is the board okay with this proceeding and then waiting until the bid comes in?
Yeah, that's fine.
Until we approve the new dollar amount
Yeah.
for Prairie? Okay,
Because Mike's got money to work with
Yeah.
right now, so that's fine.
okay,
Just keep it going.
yep.
yeah, so Shoreline Landscaping, like I said, will be out there Tuesday and, you know, so. He's been communicating a lot, so that's a great help for me with them directly, so.
Okay. So proceed, and that's our consensus, and we will deal with the higher amounts when the actual quote comes in, okay? All right, next, One Watershed, One Plan update.
Madam President, managers, so we provided just a short update on the watershed-based funding component already. And, you know, as noted, we have a deadline to get this to Bowser. And from our standpoint, what we are looking, because the Washington County has very, you know, at least from the county board standpoint, has said our preference is to have all the projects be within the district. And if there was one that we thought would be such that it would be a project that would improve water flowing into the county, they'd be okay with that, but they would want to take a look at it first. So reviewing what we currently have, we've selected, at least presently, the watershed, from the watershed management plan, the Forest Lake Diagnostic Study implementation, and then a component of that also then is the Washington Judicial Ditch 6 improvements, which technically we could just put under the 5228 implementation side as one item, but that'll be sufficient for the purposes of this year and meet the dollar amount that we're looking at, which is $78,760. For the Lower St. Croix, One Watershed, One Plan planning process, so that's been moving forward. And so Jessica has been already participating some with the MREP side. Emily will soon be getting involved, well, soon as in sometime probably later this summer, on supporting some of the plan development side itself. We also then, as the planning committee, on behalf of the policy committee, met and reviewed the proposals that were provided. So there were 3 entities that were that submitted for the work, and the planning committee reviewed those and did interviews, and I was at those interviews, and made a recommendation then to the Chisago SWCD, who is the fiscal agent. The group, upon review of the interview process, had 2 that ranked very similar, and I'm not sure if I should communicate yet because it hasn't gone out to the particular piece, but you could ask me separately, but ultimately, we made a recommendation, so, and that'll go to the Chisago board, coming up on June 12th. And then also just a note that we did have, in fact, this joint meeting, of which a couple board members attended, and as well as myself, and then Emily Hines was in town, so she was able to attend. We had some time to meet with other board members, county board members, and had a table up, and so it was a good meeting. Okay, that's all I have on that.
Okay, thank you. Steve, did you have anything to add from the One Watershed, One Plan meeting
Nothing,
that you
no.
attended? Okay, all right. All right, next is district office space.
President, managers, I think we discussed this at the last board meeting. Manager Smalls was going to provide an update. He and I met, and I don't know if Manager Smalls, if you want to kind of go from here.
Yeah, I think you received this in email. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it before you came to the meeting. If not, we can just quickly go through. I put together 4 options as possible options. One would be the obvious one is to renew the current lease. But before we do that, we had to check to make sure that our staff needs in the future would be met by this facility location, that adaptations could be made. Option 2 was finding a new location that meets our space needs and offers cost savings, or doesn't offer cost if we have to move. Third one is, we talked about is building a new customized office location, perhaps with Washington County in this adjacent area or somewhere else. And then the fourth option would be to have someone else build the building, and we would then commit to a longer-term lease of the building or part of the building. So those are the first. Now, Mike and I had met after this to discuss and get some additional information, and he has got that in the memo that you should have, it's in front of you here now with all the additional information on it. The blue typing is Mike's and staff input. And as far as a projection of our space needs, we figure we're going to need somewhere between 5 to 6 full-time employees and 2 seasonal technicians. And we think that the current facility, if we make some modifications, can meet those requirements. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes.
So if that's the case, and then the modifications can be made without a lot of cost, and it seems it's easiest for us to try to renew the current lease. And if that works out, it's probably the simplest and the best route to go. If we have to start looking at working with Washington County to build a separate building, that's going to take a lot of time, and I have some serious questions also on the impact on our budget and the money that would be available to accomplish our primary goal, which is improvement of the water clarity of the lakes in our district. So that's kind of where we stand right now, and having talked to Mike about this, and also the other thought is that our lease right now is fairly competitive compared to what we've seen outside. Mike, you saw one new location go up, and it was quite a bit more expensive per square foot to lease.
Just right next door,
Right.
about $30 a square foot.
So I guess my thought would be, or my thought to the board would be to suggest that we try to find out where our current lessor wants, what he wants for the next 5-year lease, so we know where he stands. And if we look like we have a roadblock, then we should maybe look at some other options. But it's going to take time to do this, and if we can negotiate something 1.5 years ahead of time, it's going to be to our benefit. So my thought would be, if we should at least maybe, I think Jackie McNamara said she would be interested in doing the negotiation for us to find out where the landlord stands and what he's expecting from us for the next 5 years. The only thing Mike brought up, which was a good point, is that our landlord is getting near retirement, or if not in retirement, and he may want to sell the building. So if that would happen and we'd have to leave fairly quickly, that would be not very, would set us back a lot, I think, because of the issues it would create. So we should also negotiate some way to hold that 5-year lease. So if we get another 5-year lease, we can at least stay in the building for that period of time before the new landlord would have an option to make us leave.
Or think about buying that building.
or thinking about buying
Yeah.
the building, right?
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at this for the first time, so I'm not making a decision right now, but we don't have to make that tonight. We've
No,
got
we
time
don't.
to think about it.
I think it's good to think about it. Mike and I put our thoughts together, and I think what I'm leaning towards is having Jackie see where our landlord stands, because that's gonna be the fulcrum point that's gonna drive us one way or the other.
This layout sheet that we got, is this the upper level? What are we looking at here on?
Affirmative,
Okay, so this is all upper level.
correct.
Okay, and the more designed layout at the bottom is just the same as the suggested layout on the top? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That was all architectural design work done by in-house
yep,
Jessica.
I just wanted to make sure that we're looking at the same thing here. All right,
Right, and that's where, you know, I think there's, to me, an obvious distinction between a short-term changes to the office versus a longer term. You know, especially if we thought about getting into the business of ownership, you know, maybe we would find a local contractor that could say, okay, you know, the windows that building was built in '95. So the street side windows, we know blow cold air all winter, and staff have to sit over there with a heater and the shades drawn, or that cellular shade drawn, just to try to keep the cold, you know, at bay. So there's certain things like that, and it's quite loud also. I mean, it's
yeah.
You don't need water buckets to catch the water like it was at the old city hall, though.
well, there is that.
An upgrade.
It said, come in some days and water damage on papers and things, but so, you know, I could try to, you know, garner some of that additional information, you know, sooner rather than later. Also, it doesn't take a lot of effort to have somebody come in. We've talked about also some other modifications from a space standpoint, because if we were going to be in there longer term, there would be some better use of some of the space that's so open currently up front. You know, maybe potentially taking the stairwell, shifting it, making the lower level more storage or something, and then having a meeting space or something on the upper that would basically building a deck over that other piece, or a wall, and then carry that over. But we would need to have a licensed contractor come in and give us some idea of what dollar amounts we're really talking about for a renovation that would make it like an office. And maybe that's part of what we would negotiate with, even with the current landowner or landlord, if we were to commit to a longer term lease. And it would be to his advantage, because it's not likely that the next tenant would be a hair salon. It would be somebody, it'd be of value to him as well if it was converted more to just simply an office space.
Yeah, and it's not just that front part where Jessica sits and Aaron, but that meeting area, that's not real functional.
Correct, absolutely.
And
right.
so that would have to be looked at too, to make it truly work. And I think we probably would have to install a elevator. It's not ADA compliant.
Well, the upper floor would not have to, as long if we weren't gonna have that as, if the
Not gonna
low.
be public.
Correct.
So,
If the,
okay,
yeah,
it's-
if the lower level was the meeting area, then that's the only thing that would have to be ADA compliant. And that's, so that space
Good.
currently is, because they can come through the hallway and around, or we can make it through the back door, so.
I'm
And the
also
do-
gonna contact some realtors to get some idea what might be available.
Yeah,
But we have a big handicap, because most of the building and most of the buildings that are available are out of our district. You know, everything is down
Right.
that way. And so,
Commercial wise, right.
I mean, you either have to go out into the country, or you won't see the direction, so. But we'll take a look, see what we can drum up as far as some options.
yeah, we've got some time, I think,
Yeah.
that we don't need to
And we
jump
need to
into
know what the
anything.
market looks like today also.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so thank you for the report, keeping us updated, and we'll keep moving forward on that.
Because we would like to, if we're closer to one decision or the other, implementing this would be, at least if we thought we were leaning on to one way or the other. But at the same time, I don't like to necessarily well, I mean, it's a fairly low cost to begin with. We're talking about $4,600, but if we're gonna do some other bigger changes to the office space, and that's where we're gonna stay longer term, then we can look at some of these other bigger changes.
As a suggestion, is there any reason why we can't decide to have Jackie McNamara start the conversation? Because we're not sure how cooperative or he would be, and I think we should start that as soon as possible and not keep, before.
You two were appointed, right?
Right.
To the building committee?
Right.
Yeah, I think you move forward in any
Okay.
way that you can.
Okay,
So that
we'll do
we,
that then.
we get full information on all the options. And as far as your item, if I understood you correctly, you're asking if we can move forward with the renovation of that second floor? Even before we make a decision on whether to stay or go?
Well, I think sooner than later, because then, I know, and I think by the next board meeting, I can probably work with the same contractor to get an estimate of some of the other work that we have been discussing here, a fuller renovation, what that would entail. Because I'd hate to see them do the work and then, 6 months later, decide, okay, we're here long-term and let's do this big thing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it's best that we just pause for a moment on that until we get more info from our committee. And,
And we'll try to get this started right away because we
Yeah.
need to find out where he stands on this whole thing, so.
yeah, and we have to look at also the upside and downside to each location. I mean, the place where we're at obviously is centrally located, very visible. We need to address signage on the front street side, but other than that, it's a very visible. Parking is not good. When we have a meeting there, it's pretty cramped. So that could be an issue if we start using that for more meetings. And then the renovation piece, I think overall that's probably gonna be cheaper than building a building, obviously, for ourselves, and so that has some upsides, but I'd like to see that positive
So
and
we're gonna
negative
move ahead then.
for each thing, yes,
When we were talking to him at
for each
first,
option,
did he voice some interest in possibly selling that building?
Well, we talked about it casually, but there wasn't any movement or indication on his part.
I know
whether he
at
would
one
do
time
that.
when we rented it, we were a sure thing, but he had some trouble renting.
Yes, that's true.
That, at different times,
Yep.
so.
That's true.
Really laid out.
But I think that's part of what the committee will bring back to us, all those various answers, okay? Moving on to 5E, update on the 2019 budget process.
And President and Managers, couple of items. So the district staff has been working on restructuring or preparing our 2019 budget. So Emily has completed at least the framework for that. So taking, all the and incorporating in at least presently the year-to-date through April, I guess it would be. And so we would be looking for then a schedule from the board, but then also a framework, from the board as to what you would look for staff to complete in preparation. So, and whether or not then the board wants to first go through a priority, process first, and then look at a draft budget, or we could complete a budget that is all encompassing, everything that we could think of, and let the board parcel it away. There are several options, and I guess we would appreciate some direction as to, and communication as to what the board's expectations are with respect to us moving forward on this. And then also I could give you a little bit of update because it'd have a budgetary implication too on the staffing side. We've currently have hired several of our watercraft inspectors. Obviously, we're into the season already. We were able to also hire just recently a seasonal technician to do some backfilling or gap work for Mike Sorensen. That individual will only be here until the end of August, though. So I'm working on that job description and analyzing the work plan and the needs of the district, I am presently intending to put out a posting for somebody with probably, 5, 8, 10 years of experience to help come in and manage some of the more of the programs. Because if there's one area that has a lot of work and has limited capacity internally, it's some of that stuff, and being able to get out, work with the lake residents, beaver control problems, all those fun things that are ongoing. I've also then had some communications in the last month and a half with the district's former engineer, Lisa Tillman. I just spoke again to her recently, and so you may know that, she stepped away from employment just to have her family, but is interested in coming back, at least on a part-time basis. So currently, then what that would amount to is about 15 hours a week. And so it's sort of at that level. Initially, I thought maybe 15 hours wasn't enough, but it might be just sort of a right amount from the standpoint that having her do the engineer review from a permitting side could probably cover about half of that expense in time, and then make her available for, being able to go out there and look at certain things or support other programs or projects within the district, or at least provide another professional opinion. So it wouldn't be a large budgetary component, but it would bring 18 years of experience to the table. So that would, and a professional engineer at a fairly good rate.
Well, also someone who's very familiar with this district. I mean, Lisa worked on our first rules, and that was under her guidance and probably a lot of her own input. She was the engineer for the Sunrise River project as well, so very, very deep understanding of the district.
So, but from the budget side, then, as stated initially, staff, so we've been working on a few pieces. We've already been working through the budget for monitoring and some of these other individual components. But we just would like some guidance from the board as to what your expectations are and what you would like to see in what sequence for the budget process.
Have you done the analysis of what our schedule originally was and where we're at with those items? Has that been completed?
It's all in our PRAP form, and that's been updated, yes. Currently,
Okay.
we can make that available.
Yeah.
I think it was distributed actually in February. You can go back and look at that.
Yeah, but that specific portion that deals with what's still left to be done, I think that's a really important first start.
Okay.
And the recently completed analysis of 2017 is also, there's a lot of good information in there. That's very important for budgeting going forward. And so I think those two, to me, those two documents are very important to make a decision on what projects specifically. But the policy or the framework for 2019 is consistent of the major elements in the plan. Monitoring, assessment, projects, of course, and communication is a big part of that original plan. So if we can look at those and by Lake District in particular, where we're at on the scale of completion for each of those districts, that's important to me. Anyone else?
Well, I
Any
think
thoughts?
we're gonna have the same issue we have every year, and that is, the 5 areas you mentioned are correct. But are they all equally, or they, how would we prioritize those? You know, some of us feel that water quality improvement programs and having a good feeder system for that in place is probably the most important for our money goes, because pretty soon we get past $2 million and we're out of money. So I think we need to think about that also. We've talked about improving and spending more money on communications. So these things we probably should discuss or give some direction to staff on whether they should try to make some of those assignments or whether we have to do it again in our budget meetings. I just throw that out because we go through this every year.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we do.
We could write a note to the staff about where we each stand on this, you know, looking at those 5 areas, prioritize them, you know, and then see what, how close we are.
Managers, I might suggest that we take one of 2 tacks. One is to give direction to the staff to complete an all-encompassing budget, both from the side of all the projects that remain, and what's been communicated to the district staff currently about some expanded programs or such, and then the board work through those as they have sometime in the past. The other is for the board to establish some policy guidelines, really setting a budget and a levy, and then from that, the district staff works through and develops a budget that meets those particular goals. So that's my suggestion, is 2 options that exist, but we're happy to do one or both or whatever the board desires.
Well, I lean toward the policy side, but I need to have that information that I just stated before I can make a decision about policy direction. I mean, we're not going to move forward if we don't keep up our assessments and our monitoring. I mean, that's just step 1. And when we're finished in one area, we need to be starting that other one 3 years before we actually expect to do projects. And if we don't keep that up, then we have gaps. And I think the other thing that's important to me is that when we look at our plan and the list of projects that were identified, using our adaptive management philosophy, we have added things that were not part of the original plan because we became aware of them. Something new triggered that decision. And so I'm not saying that that's a wrong decision, but because we're adding things, we're making projects bigger than what they were originally listed in the plan, then other things have been delayed. So we've got to always be aware of those kinds of issues as well. Because the things we're not getting to are not getting any better. And we're not moving forward on those items. And the whole point of that 10-year plan is to move forward on the items that we told the public we were going to move forward on. And so leaving certain aspects of that plan untouched, I'm not real comfortable with.
But the adaptive management hasn't just added things, it's also eliminated
Of course.
things along the way. So it's doing both, and we have to understand that it's modified the CIP, that's no doubt, but it's modified it for the better because we're focusing our money on the right projects. So, I mean, I agree, we need to understand where we are relative to the CIP. That's our major reason for existence, is to do these capital improvement projects and make the water in this district better.
Well, and that's a point that they're important, but they're not more important than the basic things that we do for consistency over time. And our best management practices are what keeps us moving forward without degradation. And so we can't diminish that aspect of what we do. That's critical. And so when we make changes to those basic programs, we're altering that course.
Well, we can't meet our end goal. If we stop monitoring, we wouldn't meet our end goal.
That's correct.
Right, I mean, you can't just say, well, there's $200,000 we can grab a hold of and dig another hole in the ground. Well, that's pointless.
Yeah.
So Yeah, there's a balance here, but the end goal is to improve the water. So whatever it takes to get there.
And they
part of
both-
it's
yeah.
priorities, part of it is spending money in the right places, but we have to figure out how to do that. And I think we've been trying, I think we've been working hard at it, but there's a lot of moving parts here.
No question about it. But all the parts are important.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so I'm leaning toward that policy meeting with that information that is critical to help make that decision. Wayne, how do you feel about it?
I guess, I feel like all of our areas are important, you know, but I'm not sure where I don't know, sometimes it's like, I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but it seems like sometimes you just gotta hash through what we're supposed to do according to our plan, and then do what you can do and take out what you can't. I'm not sure, but I mean, I think we have, I like to see us do projects, but I'm not certain that I wanna get rid of monitoring either, because that's an important component of what we're doing, and both on the front end and to show evidence that what we've done is working. There was an article in, I think it was 2 weeks ago in the Star Tribune, and I think it was like Representative Wojanius, maybe I told you guys this, but she was talking about all this legacy money, what a failure it's been and whatnot, and at least in our district, it hasn't been a failure. The money that we've gotten has been well spent, and we've got evidence that the projects are working. So, and we wouldn't have that evidence if we don't do any post-monitoring. So,
Key part of the adaptive
that
management.
probably didn't answer any questions for Mike, but.
Yeah,
So when you say policy, you're talking about Mike's second option, the one that Mike was describing, you're talking about, is that where we lay out some broad policy guidance and then a target budget amount, and then staff fills out the projects and the programs and things to use that budget in the best way,
that's correct.
with our review and approval.
Right, and not have it focused 1 year on just doing projects,
Right.
because then you're not doing
Right.
the assessments and the monitoring, both pre and post monitoring, to get you ready for the next project.
Right.
You know, that's a 2 to 3 year process, like I said. And if we're not moving forward on those, then we hit dead space.
Yep, and we're flat.
And we're losing not just those 3 years, we're losing probably 5 or 6 years
Right.
in moving forward. It's very important to me that we are working on the Comfort Lake watershed district, our sub-watershed district, and the Little Comfort sub-watershed district. Those 2 lakes are degrading. Other lakes are improving in phosphorus. Comfort Lake actually went up in phosphorus. And the sedimentation rate in those 2 lakes is unbelievable. So we're not doing anything, and these are the end points for the whole watershed. So it's not okay to me that we're not doing anything there. What concerns me also is that we're in this period now of heavier building. And we know that that's what triggers degradation. So the monitoring, the BMP, the monitoring of projects and so on, like we talked about earlier, that's critical so that we make sure that our rules are adhered to so that we don't add to that degradation. But we also have to correct the decades of degradation that exist right now, which is what we're doing with our other lakes. And so waiting another 10 years to get to those just isn't palatable to me. And so we have to figure out a way where we are moving forward in those 2 remaining districts, sub-watershed districts.
Sounds like you're talking about a pipeline type process where we constantly have to have something coming at us.
Right.
And balance things.
And that's been, my point for several years now, is that we need to look at the short-term needs, and we also need to look at the long-term needs
Big picture.
to keep us moving forward. And I think that, as we indicated here with this report on the office needs, we're going to have a bigger staff because we're going to have more things that need monitoring, more things that need implementing. And so we need to have projects, and I mean by projects, not just CIP, but our BMPs. We still haven't implemented our agricultural BMP or our municipal BMP program. In what are we, 8 years into our 10-year plan? And so those are big deals, and we're working on them now, but we need to make sure that those programs are implemented here within a reasonable time frame. And it concerns me that one of our critical BMP programs, the residential shoreline project, is somehow now not being considered to be an important one. And I think we've tweaked with that program in the last several years where we're not getting people utilizing the program, and so we need to address that. To me, that's the front line of the war. You're right there at the water's edge, and if we don't maintain that aggressive outreach and education on how important it is to establish natural buffers so that we can catch the runoff and we can reestablish that natural condition of the lakes, it's not going to, all the work we're doing upstream isn't going to, it's going to help, but it's not going to solve the real problem.
There's still gonna be a problem.
Yeah. So those are the things that, have always consistently bothered me in the last several years of our budget process. And I'd like to see that those are addressed. That's what I mean by policy.
I'm sure I didn't probably offer Mike any guidance the way we've done it in the past. I guess I'd like to see some sort of a outline of a budget that kind of staff recommends, but we always hack it apart anyway, so, it never ends up, the way it's presented to us.
Yeah. And I'm okay with doing that again, but if we can, and I think, Mike, you had mentioned earlier that you had discovered what the problem was in the numbers being wrong when you're asking for iterations of the budget. I think you've corrected that in the spreadsheet process. Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't be facing getting materials that aren't accurate. And so that's going to help. Because when you get a document like that, you spend a lot of time, hours going through it and getting ready for the discussion at the next meeting, and then to have it handed to you at the meeting that, oh, sorry, this was a mistake. That's going to be, I think, a huge, huge factor in helping us make this process smoother. And so when you announced that discovery, to me, that was just, like a light going on. So that should help, I think. It really should. And if we are maintaining integrity to our plan, that's our marching orders right there. So then the rest of the process, I think, should go smoother. And if we can make sure that we're keeping everything moving forward in all of those component areas, then hopefully this 2018 budget cycle should go a lot smoother. So with that all said, is the board's feeling then to just have the staff continue with this preliminary framework of adhering to the management plan, our comprehensive plan, and presenting that to us, and starting from basically the start point that we have been doing the last several years, understanding that our numbers should be absolutely accurate and not have that problem. I think that's been a big part of the issue. So if we can start from that, and your original framework is going to include all of those areas that are laid out in the plan, that satisfies my need to see what that's going to cost. And you have the report that shows what we should have, where we should have been at and what's left to do. And if you can add one little thing, maybe an asterisk is all we need. Anything that was changed from the original plan because of adaptive philosophy, and we can just identify that, whether it was positive to the budget or negative to the budget. And then we can also then see the impact of that philosophy on that original plan.
That's gonna take a lot of time and effort. It's not gonna change what we're gonna decide. I just cannot see spending staff time on that. Go back and look at, it's like trying to,
I think they've already identified it.
Yeah, I think we are.
And so
Emily's
I'm just
already
saying,
done that, yeah.
They already have that knowledge. Just put it on the chart so that that's common knowledge for all of us as well. Yeah.
Madam President, Manager, it'd probably be in two forms then. So that PRAP progress evaluation table, I see it's actually from last August, so we will update that again and make that available for the next meeting, and that'll be fairly comprehensive. And this is then, it provides a lot of information, both some text, some year information, dollar amounts, next steps, et cetera. So it's pretty good from that standpoint. But correct, we've been through the management plan update process, have hid a bunch of information, so you don't see it. But so that's been maintained, and then we've also done, of course, the adding on. Yeah. So it'll be a little bit bigger animal than you're used to seeing, but and then of course the third and final product would be then this proposed 2019 budget. So the first round will be heavy on the data side.
Mm-hmm. As it should be. Yeah. As it should be.
But it'll be all summarized,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and the point, just for clarification on identifying the impact of the adaptive management is that you get a number. Maybe it's been more positive, meaning higher costs than lower costs. Maybe it's been break even. I don't know what that is. But if we're taking money for something new that's in the budget, the planned 10-year budget, then what things that were identified in this comprehensive plan aren't being addressed?
Well, I'm sure there's gonna be, we just acquired JD6, that's something that's not even in our plan yet, so, I'm sure we're gonna wanna do something there, but it's not even in our plan, so.
My point, though, is that when you're adding a big project like that, let's just use that one for an example. When you're adding a big project like that, then it shouldn't be taking away from projects that were identified in our comp plan.
I agree.
So that means, as a board, that we have to recognize and respect that and be willing then to fund that additional item so that it's not taking away from other projects that we told the public we were going to do.
Right, I agree with that.
Okay.
I'm not saying we should put other stuff on the back burner just because, something.
Unplanned came along.
Well, I think this discussion is helpful. I mean, you understand where I'm coming from a policy. When I say policy, that's what what's been troubling me. And if we can get that information in a more condensed fashion so that we can deal with it and decide as a board,
Yeah, there's certain.
that will help.
There's certain areas of Bone Lake that, were in our plan, but didn't make sense to do a project in that specific area because there was areas that were
Yeah,
much better candidates that we found out later through diagnostic studies.
right.
Right.
So,
And that's the beauty of adaptive management. And so, I still like that philosophy, but I'm just saying that we don't want to use that to substitute for other things that were identified as a need as well.
I think staff is going to do a projection on the revenue for next year also. We should look
Yep.
at that, the levy and, what it's gonna bring in, and also what our outlook for grants would be.
Now, that's gonna be an important one.
Well, that's
because
the
of
most
change.
important, really, because
Yeah.
if we don't have our grant rates, we're gonna have an issue, so.
Well, our plan actually was made to not take that into account. Because the projects, if you go through and look at it, it's all funded by levy. Because they were important to do, and we didn't want to be dependent upon the subjectivity of grants and other loans. But the biggest thing to me on that revenue side that's happened positively is the use of that clean water loan program through the MPCA. I might have it, whatever the correct title is, but getting that money at zero interest, you know, it's like a mortgage. You know, you get the money that you need to do the projects and you pay for it over time. And that can be accommodated in a levy range, I think that is acceptable to everyone. And so that is a phenomenal tool for us to also keep in mind as we're doing this budget and the projects that still need to be done, and programs. The BMPs, you know, are technically a project in our plan. So when I say that word project, I'm using that broadly.
Just digging holes in the ground.
Right, the CIP is the digging the
Right,
holes in the ground,
right.
yeah.
Yep,
The capital projects, yeah.
yep.
All right, so is there clarity from you and or for you and understanding of how to
Yes.
move? Okay, all right.
I just had one more item though, Madam President, on the, under the budgetary part.
Yep.
So last month, I had in my administrator's report that, based on the, savings of the Curlew Pond weed, so we've now funded all the additional work that, the board considered for that. And we have, restored funding back to the, boat launch inspection program to align with what we did last year. So we'll have that fully funded now too through that savings. I was just making a rough estimate of, based off of what I was just seeing on some flyers, but I just went out and reached out to this local dealer. For this would be a four-door, four-wheel drive pickup truck. We're now out every day. There's never a day that we're not. And so, and of course, staff are often out in muddy conditions and they're tracking it back into their personal vehicles and such. So, and we're carrying stop logs in and out to Bone Lake and back or whatever else. So, and just today then we were able to get into the state contract piece. This number will for sure be under 30,000, but it'll be over the 20,000 that I'm authorized to spend. So I would like some approval to enter into an agreement with the dealership that's available for purchase of a vehicle. If you want something more formalized, I can do that, but it would be not to exceed 30,000 based on what I can see from the state contract.
Do we need a truck that big as a Silverado?
It's a half-ton. It's a four-door half-ton.
Yeah, but do we need one that big?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
For hauling the kayak around and all those other things?
The kayak, I mean, we have the stop logs, but then, you know, spring and fall, we also cart around all the garbage containers
Okay,
and things like
Just
that.
asking.
And- Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
just asking. I see a lot of smaller vehicles, you know, at other watershed districts. And so I'm just wondering if this is the appropriate one for us.
Well, typically they have multiple vehicles.
Yeah,
So then they can have something like this to pull a trailer and other things, but then
Right.
they typically will have a small SUV
mm-hmm,
or a car or things like that, but we're only gonna have one and we're typically doing shorter miles.
mm-hmm,
The insurance rate is still about $300 a year to insure a vehicle,
Mhm.
almost no matter what it is.
yep.
So
And this funding is coming not out of the reserve, but out of budget
savings on the current Curlew Pondweed, yeah. So,
savings in the curly leaf pondweed, okay,
mhm.
treatments.
Which also brings up the issue is that we're short on hours for Forest Lake. And I saw you wrote a note back to Jerry on this.
We've
I
restored it.
couldn't read that, so did you resolve that issue?
We have.
Okay.
And that's
all.
also,
That's fine.
we funded it out of that same savings.
I know, I just, when I heard it, that money was supposed to go for some of those hours also.
What
so-
was the savings? I mean, was it 50,000?
50,000.
Yeah,
And, okay, and that's just because we're not treating as much?
Substantially less.
16 acres.
On Forest Lake? That's
Right.
all? Really?
So we're gonna see what happens, but,
Was
Is
that
that
the,
because of the intercept survey said?
no,
that's-
because, yeah, right, but it's also because of the late ice out, I think, too.
That's what
Thick,
I thought.
Also, it's
thick,
beyond.
thick ice, and late ice.
Got it.
A combination,
And late snow, so snow was on there to the very end.
So it kept it from growing. So-
Right.
Oh.
yeah, there was, I think you said 28 inches just a few days
We did it,
before
we
it went
had a
out.
double check on it, because nobody could believe we would only get by with 16
Well,
acres.
so, I mean, there was, basically, there was snow blanketing the ice up until like
Melted.
boom, all of a
Right,
sudden it was
right.
gone,
Yeah.
so.
and there's no opportunity to do fall treatment of curly leaf?
It's gone.
Okay, so that's,
No,
you know,
it's all-
dying
yeah.
down, but,
It dies back by the 4th of July.
okay,
so.
all right.
Wow.
So, board? Should be a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of, and or enter into agreement not to exceed a certain amount, 30,000, did you say, or what?
I would think, I mean, this is just a local dealer, but the state contract price will be less.
I'd say 32, to use a number, just round this up to 32.
Correct.
Okay, not to exceed 32.
Using budget savings.
Using budget savings.
Yep,
I'll second.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, summary and approval of board direction. This is the sheet. I don't know that there's any more to add. Looks like everything's been, given a yes or no or in progress,
Yeah, this looks good.
so.
Anything come out of today's meeting?
So,
We have several items. that
Well,
have come out
actually, we have
today.
one item here that requires further direction from the board, and I don't fully understand it either. Keep the public updated as the barrier project goes forward.
Oh, this is that project.
Does Lake Fish Barrier?
Yeah, the Shields Lake Fish Barrier. We had a couple of folks from
Oh,
the
got it,
audience.
okay.
And
Right,
both
right.
you and I made points to
Right, right,
make
right,
sure
right,
that the
right,
staff
okay, got
kept
it.
them informed so that we don't have a crisis like we just are dealing with consistently with Third Lake Pond.
The landowners around the barrier.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
You know, Angie could write an article about that, is one of her things that she does. About that way.
Could be in.
The NREP request, that's been completed for Angie. She got everything she needed from us. I sent my ideas into Mike.
It went to the CAC, right?
Correct,
Jessica?
yep.
Yeah.
This Tuesday, the CAC went through and did prioritization on it, and they'll be, Jerry will be presenting that to the board at the next board meeting.
Okay,
So did everybody else submit ideas? I prioritized mine, and
Yeah, I gave some, I think during a budget, or excuse me, during a board meeting. And I don't know if I sent anything to you, but I think.
I pulled them from the recording.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. So, yeah, I think you and I were the only ones
Okay.
to submit, but, and then they also had the list of projects that MRAP provides for ideas. And so I think they took all of that. I couldn't attend that last meeting, but I know that was the agenda topic.
okay.
And we did ask them to do that for us as well. That's one of their priority directions from the board.
The only question I had is on number 3. It's more of an informational point. Why do we want to shift emphasis to the emergent plants rather than native terrestrial plants? Emergent plant means something coming out of the water?
Where is that number 3?
Yeah, so
I have
that was a comment on when we talked about changes to our cost share program.
Right.
And it was, I wouldn't necessarily say a shift, but we wanted to make sure that we included the option for residents to incorporate emergent plants, those in the water, in addition to the terrestrial plants.
Okay.
Our program historically has
Right.
been on the terrestrial
I
side.
understand, okay.
So it's not a no then? You are proceeding with continuing that emphasis on both? Is that what I just heard?
So the no just refers to the fact that we're not actively working on it because we were looking for further clarification from the board.
And the board, that's what the desire of the board is, that you would like it to be, that you would like to include
Emergence.
emergent plants
As
into
well.
our cost share program, for our plant grant
Plant
program.
grant program.
Plant grant program, yes.
Right,
That it's not just for onshore plants.
correct.
It's what makes sense for the shoreline.
Yeah, so I think the wording here is, should be, take out that or shifting. Work on incorporating the
Yeah.
Right, that's what's
emphasis.
confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's really a yes then.
And the other question was,
And
you want,
Is it,
Go
I
ahead,
mean, is there any problems with the DNR? I mean, can you put plants that
well, you can put
are like,
approved
in the
plants.
water?
You can put approved plants, right, Mike?
If they're native.
Right,
they're
they're
native.
native, they have to be native, they get to,
Cause we don't want people just going out and getting,
No,
we don't want them planting flowering rush, correct?
Flowering rush is probably not one we
Yeah.
wanna put on the list, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? I just wanna make
Yeah.
sure that it's,
Yeah.
that it's identified, that they're
So the-
native species.
The
of-
plant grant
well,
should
since,
call
since
that out.
that comes through the district, I would hope that we're going to make sure that we've got the DNR's approval
Some
on each
eyes
of
on
those, correct?
Right, we researched that previously.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Was there anything else?
What was the title of
Oh,
Angie's article before this one?
well, the column is called On the Water.
Called on the water now.
And what my point was, is that instead of this being Angie Hong's picture and the emphasis on that general kind of communication, make it more specific to the district. So if she's got a topic that she's talking about, then she should look for a district project that is part of that same theme, and then make it about that project in the district.
Madam President, Manager, wasn't it also, excuse me, but that even if it was a general communication piece, that we wanted the district name included into the article at the very least?
I'd like it to,
Sometimes.
I'd like it to be perceived by the public that this is an article from the district, instead of from the Washington Conservation
Or from MREP.
District, or from MRAP, or,
Right.
yeah,
Not that it's not from MREP, but it's also supporting the district goals.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's a very good writer, there's no question about that, and she has endless topics, but it needs to get personalized, so that the public that's reading it out of our local paper understands that the district, you know, we're buying those services,
Right.
and we want it to have our focus. That was my point.
So maybe just having, like, as you suggested, or having the logo by the title would work, or at the
Or a
end?
picture from the district, you know, so if it's a project, shoreline project, then it's a project that's been done in our district.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
writing this article for like 7 newspapers around the whole county, right? So,
Well, we,
Not the On the Water,
Not the
that's
On the
very
Water.
specific to the Foresight Times.
I think that was the question too we had, is if this is the article, or this is the feature that we wanted her to do for us, that wasn't clear that that's what it was, though.
it's the same articles being sent around to all the newspapers, so. And,
And that's the general thing that comes out of MRAP.
right,
And so sometimes, you know, there's not even a mention of the district, it's just
Right.
general knowledge.
okay.
But again, if we had our own communications person, even a part-time person, they can take that feeder information and personalize it. And we can then connect that general information with very specific things that the district has done, and how we've taken that information and said, okay, this is how it's happening through a BMP or through a project, and, yeah,
That's how we're adapting it, or how it's.
yeah,
finding
yeah.
us.
Okay,
There's never been and if it's come across that way, I want it on the record that that's not ever been my intention. She's an excellent writer,
Yeah.
but again, it's just always been about the focus for us.
It's the branding, the focus on.
Exactly.
on Comfort Lake, that what district.
So I think if we can continue to work with Angie, she seems to be pretty amenable to things, but this very specific one, this column, asked for by the Forest Lake Times. I think we should take advantage of that as the district so we can communicate with the public on what we've been doing for them and with them. Anything else on this list? Okay,
That third list that they got from us today,
yeah.
gotta review that.
This is really helpful, by the way, to get this out so that the board can review it at the next meeting and use that as our own checklist and reminder of things from meetings. So thank you for putting that together.
So will these grayed out yeses then be dropping off the next list?
Yeah,
We show them once that they're completed and then,
right, so I mean, we can leave them on and it could be a never-ending list, or we can drop them off once they've been graded.
I think you should take them off. You're gonna keep it, so that's your,
You have-
that's part of your.
Right, I'll just make them disappear, so they'll all still be there, I'll just hide
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
hide them from us.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, because that's great. But I do want to see them the first time they come.
Gotcha.
Obviously, they were done, so that's
Right.
great.
okay.
All right, and then the new item 6A, this is just manager updates. Wayne, do you have anything?
Well, I had a question for Mike. I'm gonna report that Bone Lake is actually looking really good for this time of year. So maybe we do have zebra mussels. I hope not.
That's where you're coming from, okay.
Maybe the projects that we've done in the
I'm
last couple of
hoping that-
years
I'm hoping that,
have actually
I'm hoping
worked.
it's projects, I really am.
It's job security.
If it is, it's really improved a lot last summer, and this spring, I'm seeing pretty similar. I mean, other than right away, there was quite a bit of turbidity I imagine from the runoff, but,
Right.
but it's already looking
Looking
a lot. We always have some turbidity like right away, but it's looking pretty good. But then I had a question on that field, on the northeast side of Bone Lake. Can you
Yes.
go over what's going on there? Cause it's looking really sick right now, but.
Very sick, yeah. So that Dolan property, I've went out there several times. I asked the Conservation District to stop by, and a week ago, I sent some photos to the agronomist that we hired to spread lime, and then also that we bought the clover seed from. So, because very surprisingly, so we paid the local farmer to just knock down and crimp the grass that was growing, and then came in with a no-till drill and drilled clover seed across the entire field. There is not a single clover plant growing that I could find. You know, I mean, I didn't walk across the whole field, but there's.
Wasn't my imagination.
No, there was something definitely wrong there. And so I asked them, I said, you know, was there something wrong with the seed? You know, did somehow, and so, so they were going to research it. They, you know, we're listed as a customer, so they know what we bought. And we're going to try to take a look at it and then determine whether or not we should reseed this spring or wait until, you know, just let it go, because there's a bunch of grass coming up again in certain sections, both on the east and the south
Right, but
side.
there's a lot of pretty bare soil too.
Well, it's covered with that grass.
I mean,
And-
certain areas, there's like rye or something that's growing out there, some kind of
Right, because
grain, but
yep, because they didn't, the rye that was there last year came in so thin, they didn't do anything, so it just went back to seed. So that got left, it did not get sprayed, it didn't get burned, or anything like that, so, it's a mystery, but again, you know, part of it could be the pH levels. I mean, I've looked at soil test reports for probably, you know, 30,000 acres worth of cropland over the year. I've never, ever seen pH levels that low that were in that field. I didn't even know it was possible to get into the 3s but some of the, we did grid sampling and there was multiple samples that came back in the threes. So if you understand pH, you know, the logarithmic element, you know, so that, that was really startling. So the 5 ton per acre was sort of a starting point from, and maybe there isn't enough time to have brought back. I mean, it certainly explains why they were such poor crops over the last, you know, several years that I've been just driving by and making observations of that field. And my wife knows I look at every field I drive by, so so that you know, didn't surprise me, but there's certainly something going on there, and that could be part of the answer.
What
But
would cause that? Do you have any
well,
idea?
I mean, so for certain crops, you have a minimum pH. I mean, corn is probably the thing that can survive the most acidity, and that's 6.0. And then, you know, then soybean, but then most, you know, clover can be in that same range, but like alfalfa and a lot of other crops.
Orange trees, if you
6,
plow them under.
right, 6.5 or,
Do you think it's from not rotating crops, though? I mean, do you think it's just from bad management, or what would cause something, a farm to
Battery
go bad?
acid.
Yeah.
No kidding,
Battery
it's-
acid, yeah.
pH of
something.
3 is equivalent to vinegar.
Yeah.
right, well, I mean,
Good lord.
so I think that it could be, it could have been a number of factors, over application of nitrogen converts into nitric acid.
Sure.
And that, you know, so there's that. Because especially if it was row crop for so many years, they were probably putting nitrogen on to try to boost the yield. But it's a never-ending cycle of poor management, you know, and then if you only have year-to-year rental agreements rather than long-term, the renters don't ever put anything back in. So
Makes the most sense.
it was never rested, it's, you know, by admission from the landowner, it's been rented out for 40-some years. So it's probably never had a rest, and it's just,
Overused,
yeah, it's
yeah.
just been beat up.
bad
yeah.
managed, yeah. Wow. Is the SWCD working with the renter or the farmer, the owner, I mean?
Well, we're the current renter,
Oh, that's the property where you rent
Yeah.
it, that's what you're saying.
right? And so,
Well, they've been working with us.
So we're growing, we're growing a
Exactly.
worse crop on it than what the
Yeah.
farmer was.
Yeah,
like, no crap, but I mean, we're trying, you know, so, but I mean, the rye that was there last year was so sparse, I mean, it was, they didn't even bother harvesting it.
so what are we gonna do about that, Mike? You gonna get Jay Riggs out there and give us a plan?
Well,
Well, I mean, the way it looks now, and all I'm saying is that when we took samples from, because there's 2 big culverts that go under the road, and that was one of the worst hot spots on Bone Lake, and now there's all kinds of bare soil out there again. So
Well, we better address that. I mean,
I
we
think
can't,
we better.
yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, it's
We don't
not,
wanna be the worst contributor
It's-
in the district.
it's brown because
that'd be
it's,
bad.
yeah, it's brown because a lot of it's rolled and dead. So,
That would not be good.
I don't necessarily think that it's all exposed, and it's certainly not exposed like clean till. There is a difference, but,
I think there's stuff starting to come up in it now a little
But it's
bit,
just,
but I mean,
again-
there's patches of rye, like or whatever grass it is.
right.
And if they're,
It's far,
If
far
it's-
less than ideal, I agree with that. It's shocking, I mean, that's why I've gone back several times, I thought, well, maybe it's gonna germinate, you know, but the seed is there, it's just, you know, but it's inexplicable that there's no plants whatsoever, that, there's really,
So that's gonna be a priority project for you and Washington County to,
well, I've asked, yeah, so the co-op that sold us the product and then did the liming, I mean, it's in their court currently to try to explain why nothing came up.
in the interim though, are we going to do some kind of berming or stop logs or something so that we're not getting that runoff through the culverts like he was talking about?
and I don't know if we will, I mean, if there's, but all I'm saying is I know that specifically got brought up at the Bone Lake Association meeting in January. And, you know, Mike Sorensen did a good job of laying out what our plans were, and that's, you know, pretty, people drive by it all the time.
you know, I suppose from that standpoint, we could put up some silt fence in a couple of key locations on that western side, just for protection, but it's,
Down in the cities, I see those, and maybe these are the stop logs, but they're black fabric.
biologs, right?
Biologs, yeah, and they're all over the, you know, in front of the drains.
Right,
So-
yeah, a lot of contractors use them here, just whatever is the
Yeah,
least expensive and easiest to
Yeah,
install, that might
so-
be it too, but.
we better do some BMPs there really quick, so that we're not contributing to that runoff, but,
I mean, I'm just seeing what I'm seeing from the road. I haven't really got out to investigate anything.
Yeah.
So,
So what you're seeing is accurate.
huh?
What you're seeing is accurate, though. It's,
well, I would say that that's a priority project for staff to address, so that we aren't contributing to and breaking the rules that we just talked about earlier. So we don't want to be, we want to be an example.
We've got another association
BMPs.
meeting in June. I'm pretty sure it'll be brought up by somebody.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So I
Does
just
the board
wanna have
agree
an
with
answer.
that, making that a priority
I
action
just wanna have an
item?
answer
Yeah,
for,
we're gonna do something.
you know, what's going on. I don't know if there's runoff, a lot of it coming off right now. Maybe there's, swales in the way of
Yeah.
the culverts and it's not an issue. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I'm not the expert either. so.
Exactly, but we're responsible for that
Right,
property.
right.
So is there a consensus that that's a priority project coming out of this discussion?
I think we should look at the, depending on what it's gonna cost, we should look at what the cost is gonna be to solve the problem, and then decide.
We have to follow BMPs. We
Right.
require that of all of our contractors and our people doing projects, and we should not treat ourselves any differently. And we're responsible for that piece of property.
Okay.
So according to what we
That's
just
the way I
looked,
feel.
what we just went over and approved, we've got 7 days or 14 days to correct.
Okay.
Certainly, managers, I could tell you that, just from what we did last year, I could probably get the farmer and, pay the farmer to do the drilling, rent the drill, and get it seeded for somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000. I mean, just again, I mean, it may, because the only thing that really could possibly be is that somehow the seed, you know, wasn't good, you know, so, but, because otherwise, it's just hard to,
Are we buying the seed or is it?
yeah, we
farm?
bought the seed, yeah.
But if you've got that low pH,
Well, that was the only thing is that,
how's that gonna grow?
right, and that's what I wanted the agronomist I asked, either the beginning of this week or late last week, I talked to him after I was out there again, and I been in touch with the Conservation District, several times about this, and, you know, part of it was just giving it a little time, but, you know, nothing has come up. I mean, there's some green things, but it's mostly just weeds. So it could be a matter, you know, that they would want us to work it up, maybe, and mix that lime in, or do another application of lime, but the lime was about $5,000. So, and there's a case then too, I would wanna maybe work with the board and council, if we're gonna spend that much more money, now we're gonna correct, we have a year-to-year lease. We would not necessarily wanna say, oh, let's spend another
So
$5,000.
somebody else can rent.
So somebody else can come back and rent it for, you know, more money and go back to where we were. So, that's why I just thought putting in clover and doing the one application would get us, you know, several years down the road without having, and we wouldn't even harvest it. We would just probably mow it back and try to let the organic matter grow and improve the soil condition, but.
Well, I don't know what that lease looks like and what responsibility the district has, but I think you're right. You've got to consult with our legal counsel to find out what our responsibility is. We can't let it sit there like it is. That's a given.
And
And
maybe,
contribute
I
to,
guess maybe have a meeting with the
sediment
landowner.
runoff.
You know, maybe point that out, say, hey, this soil's this bad, and he may say, yeah, I don't know what it is, cause I know they've farmed the heck out of it for years, but, maybe say if we're putting this much money into it, we need to have like a 2 or 3 year lease if we're putting, you know, more money into it to make the soil right.
Right, or else reduce the rent, you know, to some degree or something, you know, we go, he has some investment
Yeah.
in on it too, he contributes to the cost, but.
So the direction is for you to work with legal counsel to resolve those issues, but to take immediate BMP action.
Okay.
And the board, should I make that a motion?
Yeah.
All right, I'll make that a motion.
All right, I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just as a little note for the record, the district's, the piece of property is not subject to the rule requirements that you discussed earlier
Mhm.
as agricultural
Mhm.
land versus development land.
Ah.
But obviously, as a matter of
Mhm.
principles and
Mhm.
modeling good behavior, it's something.
Mhm.
That's right.
Okay,
Once-
Well, I
thank
guess at least go out and evaluate the situation and make sure there's no chance that if we
Mhm.
get like a big pouring
Mhm.
downpour that it's gonna
Yeah,
flush into.
we don't allow our agricultural property, though, to degrade, all right, to contribute? Or are you telling me that that's a big opening in our rules? What happens when you have an example like the one we're talking about?
So that's
On
been
s-
the,
on a
that's
property
been the
that's
ongoing
private.
problem for Bone Lake for
Well, is that
years.
something that we turn over to the Soil and Water Conservation District?
Well,
We just don't sit by and watch it happen.
yes, we do.
Oh, my God.
I'm gonna call the vote.
We already did. We passed it
voted.
unanimously.
We voted that one, but the question is what's the, with agricultural land?
Okay. Steve, anything from you?
Just check with Mike, did you know that the Hayward Avenue is being resurfaced and constructed off of North Shore Trail?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you know they're putting in a new culvert or doing something over there in that area where all the, drains all that subdivision? They've got that all graded out. They got a new culvert pipe that's going in there. So that would be a perfect place to treat all that whole subdivision water that flows down through there and into the lake directly.
Yeah, I think that we.
I'm sorry our city guy left here because he should have heard this, but
Yeah,
might want to run out and take a look at it. I started yesterday and I just saw the culvert pipes and they've graded that whole area out. So it's all dirt back in there now.
yeah, to my knowledge, they were just doing a mill and overlay, which does not require a permit, so.
Okay.
But culverts may, depending on the activity, so,
I think they're gonna, it's about a 12 or 14-inch concrete pipe they had lay on there to put in, so. So anyway, but the water backs up there pretty far, you know, and there's a lot of water that comes out of that subdivision, so.
So
Right.
we didn't see this project? The city didn't share that with us? Is that what I'm concluding?
well, I think they ask, and then, but typically then if it's a mill and overlay, because if it's not full reconstruct, then it doesn't trigger our rules.
And maybe I'm misinterpreting what I'm seeing, but I mean, I just didn't expect to see that.
No, but that's a valid point, and that's what we've been trying to work with them on, is get a better handle of all the culvert sizes, the inverts, you know, to understand the flow, really the hydrology across the entire city, with especially that area within the district.
Our iron filter is on the other side of the road and treats the other side of the road coming down, and it's not nearly as much water coming through there as there on the subdivision.
I see, that location, okay.
So that's a really perfect place to treat it,
Right, and
right
it
there.
is,
I mean,
it
it's
is,
all
and
dead
it's,
space next to that house.
and it's an area probably, if I'm,
By 20 feet by 60 feet long, there's plenty of room in there to work.
That really falls into working with them on the stormwater
Yeah,
ponding.
right, and I think it's the area that we're currently monitoring.
so
Is
anyway,
that correct?
I don't know whether you could put anything in there, but it's a nice area to look at anyway, I think. It's what I've been telling you about, that drains.
Right.
I mean, there's just like a 5-foot stream of water, 8 inches deep going down the side of the road.
Okay, Steve,
Megan,
anything
you
else?
wanna have,
Okay,
That's enough.
Greg look into that?
anything from you?
Yeah, Greg look into
Nothing
that?
for me, house still hasn't sold, so I'm still on the board.
Okay, I wanted to just update the board on a couple of things. I've been talking to Chisago County about the $1,000 for the AI, or Eurasian milfoil, particularly containment treatment, working with the Comfort Lake Association. And Ben is amenable to that. He wants it to run through the Lake Improvement District. That's Jerry Spitzman's area. So I'm putting together a cover letter for the board of the CLA to sign, and that will go over to Jerry's boss next week, and then they'll look at it from the LID. And if their budget's already been set for this year, so if they don't have money to do that, then Ben's going to find it in the county project. So, and all of that should happen within the next 2 to 3 weeks. All right, so that's a positive event there. And the other thing was actually part of our checklist here, the summary of board direction. I had mentioned about the buffer law, and as I was reading it, I was interpreting the statute to allow us to put projects forward to the conservation district, and then they would go to the board to get funding. And so I had a meeting with Jay Riggs a couple weeks ago, and he told me that the law isn't really, it's confusing, the statute's confusing because it's not really implemented that way, and so that was very valuable. And that project, working it that way wouldn't work. Even though it talks about in the statute, riparian projects, buffers, any type of thing like that, should go through the watershed, or excuse me, the conservation district. And then they go to the county for the money, because that's where the money is going for those things, but it doesn't quite work that way. So that was revealing, sad, but revealing. So that is kind of off the table, but it's an ever, I don't know, it's the seeking for light, I guess, and clarity in some of that stuff. But Jay, it was a very good conversation, and he's very interested and excited about working with us on our Ag BMP program. And so we talked about that a bit, and what our intent was. Wayne and I are meeting with Mike to help provide some structure to that, so that helped him understand it as well. So that was all very positive. So I just wanted to update you on those two things. And Mike, is there anything else from you? No? And Chuck, anything? EOR?
I guess I would just add, Mike Kinney and staff had submitted an abstract for the this Environmental Water Resources Institute conference, and so I gave the presentation this morning on the Moody Wetland Project. There were several people in the audience. It's a really broad audience of water treatment, wastewater, and stormwater, so it was kind of, there was a few different folks there, and they seemed interested. So
A big attendance?
for the conference?
Yeah.
It's tough to estimate. It's several hundred, I
Okay.
think, all told. And all over the United States.
Yeah, when Mike told me about that, I looked him up on the web, and it looked pretty impressive. I was hoping to maybe be able to sneak in and listen to the presentation, but I had other commitments, so I'm glad that you went, and it went well. That's good. Okay, Mike?
Well, Matt, as I imagine, just was gonna let you know that I'll be out of town next week, but available if needed. Just shoot me an email or a text or something.
Vacation, I'm assuming, yes?
Yes.
Good.
Rapids,
Good.
South
Rapid City, South Dakota.
Good for you, good for
Yeah,
I
you.
heard that's a good place to visit.
Yeah.
There's
We were
no,
hoping that we were gonna know somebody by there.
I was hoping you would too.
there's nothing else on the agenda before the board?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
You.